Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Two women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely important.
You can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead. All right, let's get into it. This episode is all about personal brand and what you can do and why you should, focus on creating your own personal brand. So why are we talking about personal branding today? Well, I feel like in our industry, especially as a marketer, you have to treat yourself as a brand, as your own client, like when you're thinking about your professional life, right? Or as I read this recently in a Fast Company article, you have to be the CEO of me.
Love that.
And yeah. And, a personal brand, as we know from all of our clients, a brand is valuable. And that's why you should be focusing on branding yourself. So I thought we would start, Kelly. Why is it important to build a personal brand? I mean, I don't think we have to convince people, but I think these are really good points to make.
Sounds good. Well, the main thing is you want to differentiate yourself from what everyone else is doing. Especially if you're a new job candidate and you're looking for a job, for us as employers to be able to look at a resume, and if one particular person has a stake in the ground about a particular subject or an area or an expertise, and they're very clear about it, it really makes us really makes that person stand out. So differentiating is really important. It builds credibility. It builds trust. It builds confidence, with your prospective employers, with prospective clients. It provides thought leadership, which we're all about here on the show. It helps you gain name recognition and puts a face behind your business or a face behind, the social channel. Yep. Do you have a couple of more to add?
Yeah. I mean, I just building on that, like it makes you relatable, right? Like if we talk about like a LinkedIn profile, it's just your photo. And it's just a whole bunch of words, right? And so building a brand out and adding some of these other layers that we're going to be talking about just helps people connect with you faster. I would also say that building a brand, once you have a brand, you can use it to strengthen your network. You can start connecting with people. I think you just touched on it, like confidence, like once you feel like you've solidified like who you are and how you're going to communicate that out, it will give you the confidence to go out and start meeting people or making new connections, or maybe it's asking for informational interviews or looking for a new job. It could be all of those things. Anything else?
Well, again, ultimately provides this higher job stability, right?
Yeah, a platform.
Yeah, because it gives you a platform. And so for me, for example, now, which I find amusing, anytime I see someone who I'm connected with on social media, they're all like, "Oh, I'm always hearing about Two Marketing Moms," and they remember our brand, right? They remember what it is that we do. I loved XYZ, and people tell me that they listen to our podcast. They might not like it on social media, but they listen and they know what it's about. And so I am associated with Two Marketing Moms now, and that's a part of my personal brand and yours as well. And so that's something that it hopefully is a positive association that everyone wants to realize, okay, what is that hook? What is that person all about?
Yeah. Agreed.
So the thing that I struggled with the most is really kind of understanding the difference between personal branding and professional branding. And how do you balance your personal and your professional profiles, Julia?
Yeah. So for me, my personal and professional brand are one and the same. And as I was telling Kelly and I were chatting before we hit record, it's easy for me that I have two profiles. Um, Even though my personal profile, I honestly never really use that much. So it's easy for me to separate them. If I didn't have my own business, I might personally choose to convert my personal feed to my professional feed to focus on one thing. But for most people that are listening to this, they might want to meld their personal and professional brand together. And I think that's totally okay. I think all the advice we're going to give still applies. If you have personal posts and you're going to share things, you can also mix that in with the things that you're going to share business wise as well. It gives a whole 365-degree view. With that said, I do think from a professional branding point of view, places like Twitter and LinkedIn, it's a little bit easier to be less personal. And you do have to, if you are going the professional route, you do need to be careful. You don't want to be like F-bombing on a Saturday and then, putting on the suit and tie on Monday kind of thing.
Agreed.
So you have to be careful for that balance. But I really think the most important thing, so just building out, your brand, forget your personal stuff, right? Because I think once you figure out your personal brand, you can then bring that back into it and find a place for it to fit. And I know you're going to talk about this too, Kelly. I call it the solid and singular brand idea, but you also call it like your why. Like, who are you? For me, I am 5'1". 5'1" is Julia. And so, the kind of the words that I settled on is that we're a creative collaborative that drives momentum, marketing momentum. And so most of the words that I use in my brand are centered off the word momentum. I have a newsletter called Marketing Motivation. I talk about being a catalyst. I talk about kinetic energy. It's like kind of my way of talking about how I help my clients. And if you know me, that brand really fits. And so it feels very natural. So that's like the first thing that I think anyone would need to really think about when creating their personal brand. And maybe for our listeners, it's literally the melding of their personal kind of ethos, philosophy with their work as well.
It's kind of like an elevator pitch, if you will, right?
Yeah,
your own
totally.
personal mission. And what I like to do, which is the biggest challenge, is to simplify it and see if you can say it ideally for sure in 10 words or less. And if not less. And that's always a challenge. Have you been able to come up with that one-liner for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I literally use like at least for 5'1", like I'm a creative collaborative that drives marketing momentum. And then when I talk about it from a personal level, I offer strategic marketing leadership to nonprofits and associations that need marketing momentum.
Love it.
So I've really worked on getting that kind of singular focus. And so for like some of our viewers, like their singular focus maybe, here's like a couple ideas. Like it could be based on your discipline. Like, are you a creative person or are you a copywriter? Or it could be like your ambitions. Like, do you want to work with a specific client, right? Like, so you and I both work with nonprofits. So a lot of the things that we're talking about on a daily basis are about causes. But maybe someone wants to really be a retail person, or they really want to be a consumer products or a B2B. Or maybe it's someone who, you want to use tech, or you want to talk about your MarTech or or something like this. But the basic thing is you have to focus on one thing. But I also feel like I have to say this. I know you'll have an opinion on this, Kelly, because I know you like Tim Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Some people in our audience still may want to be a generalist. Like maybe you've only been in the working world for a couple years. And so it's weird for you it feels uncomfortable to say, I only want to focus on one thing. Right. And I'm going to say that that's okay. You can still be a generalist with a specific point of view. So for instance, be a data person, be a quote person, be a mom advice person, be an ad fanatic. But you can always evolve that over time, right? So like if you decide to be the ad fanatic, you can morph that as you get more experience under your belt, or if you pick a specific client you want to work on, or if you change from being a copywriter to a media buyer, you can always morph it. So I like this quote from this woman. She said, decide who you are and bleed it.
That's one way of saying it. Yeah.
So like, just decide who you are.
Yeah.
And know that you can, change it. So go back to what did you want to say when I said, like, you can still be a generalist?
No, of course, but when you're going to talk on social media, it doesn't mean that you're going to just talk about 500 things. You still have to pick those 3 to 5 things that are important to you. So you might have a general key message of what it is that you are. And then there's sub points underneath that larger umbrella. So for me, my one-liner is for work, professionally, is that I'm a champion of ideas that generate change for purpose-driven brands. Okay. So change, what does that mean? That's driving awareness. That's encouraging engagement. That is driving donations, anything underneath that nonprofit umbrella. But beyond that, I also talk about 2 of my side hustle projects that are kind of under that umbrella. And one is this podcast, which for me has been a really great way to connect to the younger generation of women, to help them give them a step up, because we're trying to give advice of things that we've done to help others and learn from our mistakes and take some of our advice along the way. And then my second side hustle is the William Swiddle Media Club, where I try to read a book a week, and it's usually business related book, and pull out kind of like the cliff notes of all the interesting factoids that I find there. So for me, that's that part of me that always wants to be learning. And, I have all those books that I've read, all 52, 55 books that I have on the website at williamswiddle.com. And so anyone can go check them out. And I have I can send people there to say, oh, I would recommend for college students, you pick these 5 books, for example. So that gives me some narrowed down things to talk about. But I have a personality too, right? And so there's things that I talk about beyond that in social, but I'm very careful, like you said, with Twitter and LinkedIn. I definitely don't show. First of all, I need to be more human. I think that's some sort of a challenge that I need to acknowledge. I'm probably way more professional than I need to be on those 2 channels. Instagram is where I feel like I have an opportunity to do both. I use Instagram as a channel for both personal and professional. So I might talk about my kids, my dog, Edgar Allan Poe, my yoga practice. Some of those things are going to come out in addition to the professional things that I talk about. And I think that's good. It makes you human. You just have to decide what are the channels that you want to do that. The one person that just reminded me of from a social media perspective is Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy is the author and TED Talk person who did she was a researcher, and she did the research study on power posing. Remember?
Oh yes, you talked about that.
So I follow her. Well, she's an avid rollerblader. So she posts these really funny videos of herself rollerblading, like dressed up in 80s garb and just rollerblading and having a great time. And that's like a great way of taking your professional and melding it with your personal, because that really gives her a unique identity.
And she does multiple rollerblading videos.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So see, that's like that's how she's focusing on her one thing, like her one passion. She's folding in there.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Oh, I'm going to have to check her out.
Yeah, she's fun. So I want to learn a little bit more, Julia, about you and your journey, and what are the steps that someone can take to build a personal brand?
Yeah. So I think, and we just talked about it, like getting that one sentence, who you are, and really crafting that. It has to be like the best thing you've ever written, right? So that could be like, you can call that your bio. That could be your LinkedIn about section, right? Like that's the first thing, right? And then I think you need to start building out what I call like your profile. It could be a resume. It could be a website. It could be your LinkedIn profile. It could be your Twitter feed. I'm going to go ahead and say, like, I never thought I would say this, but LinkedIn is a great place to start. I think LinkedIn matters professionally. I hated LinkedIn until I really had to think about my personal brand and what that was. And the reason why is it's the easiest place for people to learn about you. It's like everyone will go to your LinkedIn. And all of the sections in LinkedIn, it's a fairly good user experience. So like it's a great prompt, like your portfolio, your experience, your interests, endorsement, testimonials. It goes through all of the most important things. And it all builds you up to your personal brand, right? So obviously things like, your experience are maybe a little straightforward, right? But it's the first place to start to establish yourself. If you decide no LinkedIn and you do a website, which I know lots of college kids are doing. I think every graduating college student, at least from a B school, is going to have a website. I would say keep it simple. The look and the feel are the first things that people are going to absorb about who you are. It's going to be the first major interpretation of your personal brand. So keep it simple, but obviously be creative within how it would fit you. And then people are going to know the highlights. Like people are going to want to see a portfolio, but I've also had a lot of conversations. And when I meet people and talk to them about like their experience, I just want to know what they did. Like, it's great. You worked on the Coca-Cola account. Great. But what did you do? Like, were you the brainstorm person? Were you the account coordinator? Were you a QA person? Did you write strategy?
What was your contribution?
That is the thing that matters the most. And, when you're starting off in your career, people are not expecting you to say that, you came up with the creative concept, right? Like they expect that. But I think the most important thing is to be upfront and about your contribution. Okay. So I think then you take it deeper. This is where it gets a little bit more involved in creating your personal brand. I think the next place is, what can you produce to position yourself? And Kelly, like you just explained what you did. Like you have been doing the media club. I know because I see all your book reviews, and you had the idea to start this podcast. And so you went through that step of figuring out what you can produce. For some people listening, you may not want to produce things. You may not be in the position to produce things. And that's okay. Your producing things might just simply be sharing relevant information from people and publications that are in your point of view. If you're the data person, then you're sharing cool data stuff, cool research stuff. So like from a personal point of view, like in my career, early on in my career, I got embedded with a client and really went down the nonprofit niche. So I kind of fell into that and it was great. And I dug in hard. And as a young person, I didn't know how to create a personal brand, but I kind of just took the first step when I started doing this research report about awareness campaigns. It was like the first major thing that I did that was producing something. And I got my feet wet, I owned it. And it was the first step for me. So, maybe our listeners can't own something at work. But what's one thing that you could talk about outside of work, right? Like if you didn't want to talk about, say you're a media buyer and you can't really reveal what you're looking at for your clients. Like how can you make that and look at it from an outside perspective?
Well, again, I mean, there's different approaches to this, and we can go into the section now about, advice to give people to help them discover what their personal brand is. And the two that resonated the most with me, one who has been around for 25, 30 years is Gary Vaynerchuk. And he, regardless of what you think of him and, his potty mouth, his personal brand has been consistent for 25 plus years. And he's spent the last 5 years really focusing on helping to bring the next generation of kids up and providing inspiration. And what he talks about continually over and over again is document your experience. Document it. What is your process? Yes. And I think that's a different way of thinking about it in terms of Seth Godin says the same thing. Just ship it. It doesn't have to be perfect. He writes a blog a day and has done so. He's written over 9,000 blogs since the 90s. Just ship it. Not every blog post that he's going to write, not every post that you have, never every video that you do is going to be perfect. But you're putting yourself out there. You're learning from every single time that you do it. And I think that's super important. And the second,
that's producing. Yeah. That's what I consider producing. Yeah.
Well, to me, saying documenting feels less stressful than producing. Producing feels like, oh, I got to have a finished product and I got to edit it. And you know what I mean?
True.
If you take it back, I'm just documenting what I'm doing. I mean, I'm reading this book and I'm highlighting, the things that I find are interesting. That's what I am doing with the book club. I'm documenting what I think is the most interesting quotes. The second person that I've learned a lot from is David C. Baker, and he's an advertising agency guide, and he wrote a book called The Power of Expertise. And he has a concept called Drop and Give Me 20. What are the 20 things that you know based on your experience that no one else knows? And are you able to rip those out? And everyone has that based on whatever your experience is. 20 things that you learned from college, 20 things that you learned from high school, 20 things that you learned about living in XYZ community or, going overseas for the summer. Those things really, matter. And they really help kind of narrow down because people are going to ask you, your experience is different than anybody else. So those 20 things, you have to have those 20 things.
Yeah, that's a great exercise.
Who you are. And it's not an easy thing to do, let me tell you. But you should do it. Yeah. So what other things do you have in terms of advice to help people discover what their personal brand is?
I think we already touched on this, like find your platform, right? Like I think the go-to a lot of the times is social. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But people might want to just be on a website and do their blog, as you say, and document it. Or maybe they want to start an email newsletter. I would just say, find the platform that works, that you're going to be able to dig into. That's a huge step to make.
And I think for me, very similar to a lot of the things that we talk about is, find Simon Sinek, find your why. What is the reason that you exist? What is your purpose? What's important to you? What do you want to be known for? And that really is kind of part of the drop and give you 20 exercise. To me, that's the most important is an exercise that everyone needs to do, right?
Yeah. But, I would also add on that like being consistent, not just in your messaging, but in sharing, right? So like if you write 2 blogs a year, that's not really going to be enough to build your
Agreed.
personal brand. If you, you have to figure out, it's got to be often. It doesn't have to be all the time, but it can't be rarely. You gotta be in the always out there. I mean, unfortunately, our worlds are now like, so much of it is like based on an algorithm, we don't see everyone's stuff, or, on the flip side, we're inundated with stuff. So we may ignore some stuff. So like frequency, a typical advertising word, is important when building your personal brand. I mean, honestly, everything we're talking about that we would recommend to a client, we should be telling us, the CEO of me.
Yes. Love
when
that.
we're creating our brand.
Yeah.
And then also something that you mentioned earlier was, be human and tell real stories. I mean, there are some brands that don't get real personal that I love. But most of them are where it's a person. Well, I feel connected. Like if I saw them at a conference, I could go up to them and just feel like we already have something, it's not cold.
Yeah, I have an example of that. When we launched the podcast, I really struggled with how to introduce it, how to tell people why I did this, and why it began. And I gave an example of my mother, who is in her late 70s, was diagnosed with macular degeneration in the last couple of years, and she literally can't see hardly at all. And so she's not allowed to drive anymore, but she's a triathlete and she still wants to ride her bike. And so her friends would ride their bikes with her, and they would go in front of her, and they would take spray paint, and they would spray paint orange spray paint around any of the potholes, so that she wouldn't ride her bike into the potholes for her. I mean,
wow.
what kind of friendship is that, of someone who doesn't let you fall in the potholes? And that's what I like to call this podcast. We don't want you to fall in the potholes. And
totally.
So by telling that story, I have to say that got the most interest in terms of explaining why we do what we do. And storytelling is a huge part of that. And I'm sharing a personal example from my own family. And so there's a humanity in that. And it's a hard thing to do. And I admit I don't do it very frequently, but when you do it, it resonates really well, because that requires vulnerability, right? In order to share at that level.
Yeah. It's not just sharing something that's topical. Yeah. I love that. I love that story. I think you told that on a podcast episode one time.
Maybe I did in the first part.
Okay. So you talked about Gary, and I agree.
Vaynerchuk.
I mean, I guess I love to hate Gary, honestly. Okay. So what are some other...
Let me admit something about Gary V. I will say, I didn't like him for many years, because I felt like everything he was saying was connected really well with men, but not with women, in terms of the bro culture, right?
Yeah.
And the way he swears and talks to people.
Yeah.
And he's such a hustler.
And he's rough.
He's definitely rough around the edges. But in the last couple of years, he's really made an effort to bring people on the show to answer questions, and people are loving it. And I admit, I don't think I've ever actually liked one of his videos, but I probably watch one a day. So that says something. Yeah.
Well, I have liked one video. I could admit it. But here's an interesting thing about him. Like, his personal brand, right, is so clear. And then when I got this email that like he was doing this like wine business, I felt like, how is this your personal brand? Like, that's
how he started.
He started in wine?
He started. Yes, his parents, you need to know his backstory. His
Yeah, I
parents
don't know it.
owned a wine company. And so he started the Wine Library video series where he just talked about wine. And that's how he kind of built himself up to be who he is. And so that's his backstory. And it's fascinating to me.
Interesting.
Anyway,
Interesting.
I have a different opinion about him now than I did. He's not for everybody, but I think there needs to be a female version of that, but not as rough around the edges. And maybe we can be that.
Well, it also brings up a good point because I personally thought the wine thing was such a left-hand turn, and you're saying it's really the center of his of his
inception story.
Yeah, but I think he got so far away from it that when he started going back to it, I was just like, "What is this?"
If you hadn't been following him since the 90s,
so word to the wise. Yeah, I mean, you can morph, as I said, but like, it's got to be intentional, and you've got to string everything together. Otherwise it does come across disjointed. But yeah, I mean, shout out to Gary. Some of his stuff recently, I reposted something because I was like, oh, thank you for saying that. Okay. Who else, Kelly?
So the ones that I love are, in the marketing realm, Simon Sinek. Of course, because of the fact he's written a blog every single day of his life, and he's written 21 books, I believe. My favorite is Linchpin. And he practices what he preaches every single day. So he is someone that I really look to in terms of his profile. And he always has a video with the background of all his books is there. And the second one that's under that same umbrella is Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why and had the TED Talk that's gone so popular. And he's really all about inspiration and making people focus on why they do what they do and building.
Wait, hold on. You were just talking about Seth.
Yeah.
Oh, you said Simon.
I was talking about Seth. Now I'm talking about Simon Sinek.
Oh, okay.
Sorry if that wasn't clear. So those are my two go-to under the marketing realm. Now Simon has taken things to the nth degree. When I went to go see him right before the pandemic started, he was wearing a pair of jeans that had thread on them that said inspire. That might be taking it a little bit too much, where he wears jeans that says he's inspiring. Regardless, I like what he does. A couple other people that I adore are Marie Kondo. I mean, she's
I know you
all about, I'm all about cleanliness and getting rid of things and only keeping things that I have joys. If you look around my house, everything that's in there is there for a purpose and a reason. And if it's not utilitarian, then I love it. And you may question some of those things, but it's same thing with my wardrobe. So I love her philosophy and I live her philosophy, and, I want to live a life that sparks joy. And similar to her, there is Clea and Joanna from The Home Edit. So they've kind of modernized the same concept, but they're all about rainbows and fun and color, coordinating things by color. Joanna Gaines from Magnolia, has her own farmhouse look and a very particular way of things. So those are the three that on the home design part of things that I really love, because I'm a big home design fanatic. And the last one that I would mention is Brene Brown. Brene Brown, I've read all her books. I've seen her TED Talks. I love her ideology. She's a researcher. She's a storyteller. She studies vulnerability. She studies shame, and she studies empathy. And her main concept is that you have to walk through vulnerability to get to courage. You need to choose courage over comfort. And you'll have to she calls it embrace the suck. And I love her ideas. I love her concepts. And she lives all of those in, the podcast that she puts out and the posts that she puts out.
She had a lot of really great stuff over the past year about, confronting white fragility and things like that. And she said it, and it had to be said. And it was, I appreciated it.
What about you?
Okay, so I have 5 that probably not anyone knows, but they are all women, and they're all in the advertising marketing world. The first one is Jessica Zweig. She is the owner of the Simply Be agency. It's all about personal branding. I love her style. Like if you go to her Instagram, she is so consistent in her messaging, her look and style. She uses bright colors. She's very focused on energy. She has a crystal room in her agency. And she always has yellow. She always has bright. She always has pineapples. So everything is very consistent and she's always offering good stuff. And so she took her brand from literally nothing. And now she has I think her book is in the top 5 for Amazon, business books right now. You should add that to your list, Kelly.
I will. Yes.
Another one that I'm a super fangirl of is Alex Cattoni, of the Copy Posse. And she has, her brand, her personal and professional brand are the same. So everything is about the Copy Posse, and she's so consistent again in her messaging, but she also infuses such cool stuff in it. So most of the time she's talking about copy and how you can be a better copywriter. She's always giving those types of advice. And then last week she emailed out about the top 10 business books that you might not know about.
You have to send me the list.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. And so of course I listened to her. I mean, obviously books are copy, but she just, she's able to throw out things that are still consistent with her brand. Next is a girl that's named Julia. So of course I love her. Her name is Julia Rock, and she's a badass career coach, and she's always giving great advice. She has these little things in the morning, you need to hear this today. She helps you start off your day with something positive, and she also infuses it with so much personality. She had a post where she was getting dressed for work, in a suit. And I just really enjoy following her. 2 others just really quick are, someone I recently met. She doesn't have much of a following, but she's a mom who had decided to go out and start working for herself because she wanted to be able to have a better work-life balance. And so she's out there looking for work and in the marketing and pretty much the marketing world. And her name is Caitlin Bond, and her posts are all about work-life balance. That's where she decided to lean into. So she is consistent in her messaging, and she also has great frequency of her posts. So I, along with other people who follow her, are always seeing them. So that's another great example of someone who has found their voice. And then the last one is the copywriting mom.
Yeah.
She's a woman in India that I follow, and she is just all of her posts are genius, on Instagram. I'm I walk away every single time with something that I can really chew on and apply to my work. So I hope all of you, maybe we'll include those in the show notes or something, all the people that we mentioned, because they're all really great examples of helping you to figure out where your personal brand.
I love that you included some that are unknown so that we can check them out to see how other people kind of evolve versus the bigger celebrity versions of them.
I like it all. I always am rooting for the small ones, the up and comers.
Love it. Well, last week, it was this week. My goodness, time is going fast. This week I attended the Ad World online conference.
Oh.
And there was a woman named Goldie Chan, and she did a presentation on personal branding for introverts. And you and I are introverts, which may be surprising to people.
INTJs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we skate the line between introvert and extrovert. Professionally, we force ourselves to be extroverts, but personally, we may be standing in the corner at a party.
Totally.
So feel free to engage us. We might have something to say, but we're all tapped out for the day. Who knows? Anyway, so she said that a personal brand must show the 5 C's. And the 5 C's are: number 1, confidence. Confidence inspires trust. Curiosity, listen and learn more, ask questions. Credibility, which is being trusted and being believed in. The 4th one is she calls catalyst, and that is be a person or a thing that precipitates change or helps others to be open to change, which I think is important.
Yeah, I love that.
And the 5th one is a combination of commitment/culture. And that's really the attitudes and behavior characteristics of a particular social or work group. And, we've talked about culture in the past and how important that is, and making sure that your culture really shows through and demonstrates who you are as an organization, but what are your basic values and morals and those sort of things. So I love that idea of the 5 C's: confidence, curiosity, credibility, catalyst, and commitment, from Goldie Chan.
Love that. And so wait, what did she say? Like, did she talk about like the difference between introverts and extroverts, like when it comes to the 5 C's?
She didn't. She just really focused on I might be able to pull up her presentation real quick because I have it on the different types of introverts. Yeah, she's from the founder of Warm Robots. And she talks, yeah, I know. She said there's 4 different kinds of introverts: social, thinking, anxious, and reserved. And then she talks about those 4 different types of introverts. I think I'm only socially, I think I'd be socially. I'm not reserved. I'm not introvert with my thinking. I'm not sure. Who knows? And then it talks about, what must an introvert do to carefully grow their personal brand? A lot of the things that we've talked about: play to your inner strengths, discover your why, find your quiet focus, all these sort of things. And then she goes into the 5 C's. So really a lot of it is a lot of the things that we've talked about, but she has this great quote that she said is, if no one is listening to you, then you don't have a brand.
Yeah.
But if you're exhausted by building your brand, you won't have anything to say.
Oh.
So that's kind of an oxymoron, because introverts by nature, it takes energy. Putting themselves out there takes energy to do that, right? But you kind of have to.
Is that why I've been so depleted this year?
Yes. Yes. So after these podcasts, we go in our rooms and we curl up in a ball. No, I feel energized by these podcasts.
I totally do too, but it definitely, like, because I am an introvert, I have to go and almost plug my battery in to recharge. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I do think it's interesting in the 5 C's, if you're an extrovert, right? Confidence is a totally different thing to an extrovert than an introvert, right? So I feel as an introvert, I did not create, or I hesitated in creating a personal brand and really putting myself out there because I didn't have that innate confidence. I really had to build myself up and maybe do a little fake it till you make it, to create that confidence and get that momentum. Obviously, now that I've done that, I feel more confident and I can exude more confidence. And then curiosity is also a very different thing for an introvert than an extrovert. So I think really thinking about those 5 C's, depending on who you are, that can also really maybe just help you think through how to create that personal brand, or what that personal brand really is. And maybe give you the push you need to, put your stake in the sand.
So I have 2 options for quotes to end our podcast today. Would you like to choose Seth Godin or Gary Vaynerchuk or both?
I'm going to go with Gary V.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. So Gary V's quote is, "It's important to build a personal brand because it's the only thing you're going to have. Your reputation online and in the new business world is pretty much the game. So you've got to be a good person. You can't hide anything. And more importantly, you've got to be out there at some level."
Preach, Gary.
I'm going to do Seth. I'm sorry.
I know you love Seth.
I got to balance him out with some Seth, if that's okay. So the last quote is, "There are more disconnected people than ever, yet we're all looking to be seen. Be a person who creates meaning. Do work that matters for people who care."
Thank you, Seth.
All right. Well, we'll end there, and we hope you gave us some ideas to get going and find that, 10 words or less idea of what it is that you represent and what your why is and what it means.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.